All right. We can be we can defend drugs on the show too. It's fine. Listen, there's no credibility anymore. It's the internet. Hey, what's up, America? Welcome to Goodnight America. I'm America's sweetheart, Eric Ryan. Not that I have to tell you what we do on this show because it's the biggest goddamn thing on the internet, but I'm going to do you the favor anyway. What we do is we talk to the world's most brilliant nonfiction authors. And today is no exception. Let me tell you about Brian Sachetta. He's the author of the Get Out of Your Head book series, a collection of personal development works focused on helping readers overcome various forms of mental illness. I wish I could read. Brian's desire to help others with anxiety and depression grew out of his own experiences with both afflictions. Throughout his works, he recounts his past struggles with them due to not having the right information at his disposal. That's why he's so passionate about using his skills to influence the lives of others. He wants to help as many of his followers as possible to avoid such a fate. Now, your past experiences. Well, first of all, welcome to the show. We've been talking for a while, so it feels like I shouldn't have to do this, but I will. Thank you for being here.
Likewise, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be something. Okay, your past experiences. We're both Patriot fans, and this is sort of one of those things in life that fascinates me. How if we had, for those 20-ish glorious Tom Brady years, had we watched one of those football games in the same room as a Jets fan, for instance, it would have been a totally different experience, even though everything else is the same. It's just perspective. So I listened to a few of your podcast appearances, and you tell this story of college, and it was a high anxiety moment for you, which is you were talking to this girl, and then eventually it's at night when some night you're texting back and forth. It was obvious that she had been drinking, and it was obvious that she was coming to see you, and this sent you into some sort of a panic attack or a high anxiety situation. This is that perspective. If I was talking to a girl, I could tell she was drunk and she was coming over to see me. This would be the greatest. I'd almost believe in a God. I would be like, oh, my whole life is incredible. I'm so excited about this. But within perspective, it doesn't work. And I'll say one more thing before I'll let you expound on this. But like I said, before we started recording, I had a porn addiction expert on last week. And he said something to the effect of trying to explain addiction to a non-addict is like trying to explain parenting to a non-parent. And within that frame, I guess that makes a little bit of sense. So I just don't know. It just fascinates me. A drunk chick texting me saying she's coming over. Oh, God. So why do you think it is? I mean, at a macro level, that you and I would have such wildly different experiences with the same general content.
Yeah, I mean, you got me laughing on that one. So props to you. One thing that really comes to mind is there's this quote that, I don't know, it just kind of lives out there. It's sort of like attributed to Dr. Wayne Dyer. Maybe he said it a little bit differently, but like the quote is essentially, we see the world not as it is, but as we are, right? So we see things very subjectively rather than objectively. So that's how I can look at that situation and say, ooh, I see fear, I see panic, I see doom, I see all this uncertainty. And you can look at that situation and say, woo, baby, like I see excitement. This is going to be great, you know? So that's like where I want to start the conversation. I think to get deeper, right? That event happened when I was 18. So I was pretty young. And I actually had something similar happen about like 6 months before that when I think I was still 17. So I didn't, when both of those things happened, I didn't really have that much experience on the dating front, on the romance side. So to me, it was like, it becomes one of those like rich get richer, poor get poorer kind of things of like, hey, okay, if you started dating at a really young age, you build that confidence. That confidence leads to more and more relationships. And you just get to the point where you're like, this isn't a big deal. I don't even think twice about it, Whereas like for me, I was a little bit more of a late bloomer. So it was like, okay, I started dating somebody at the end of high school. And that was the first time I ever really like pursued anything resembling a real relationship, and that didn't go well at all. So all of a sudden my brain, my nervous system is rewiring for relationships and intimacy equal pain. Right. And then fast forward 6 months later, and I'm like, hey, I've done this sort of thing before, and it went really poorly. And I was, as a result of that experience, the first one, like I went to a really dark place. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't even know what I was dealing with, that sort of thing. Here I am 6 months later on the precipice of possibly another one of those experiences. The other thing that I would say too, right, is like relationships are two-way streets. So like if she had come over and been like, dude, it's cool. Like, you're nervous. It's like not a big deal. Like,
Mm.
you know, take a breather. Like, let's just have some fun. I like you, that sort of thing. That would become more of a corrective experience where I'm like, oh, it's okay to be nervous in these situations. It's okay to be vulnerable and speak up and say how you feel, instead. And I always say when we talk, like I talk about this, this little incident on podcast episodes, it's not to speak poorly of her at all, right? It's like, she's a good person. I know her, has nothing to do with her. It has a lot more to do with me. At the same time, like, again, if she had had a different reaction, I would have then had a different reaction. Since she, essentially came over, hopped on my lap, felt my heart shaking, and, could tell that I was really nervous. She freaked out because I was freaking out too. So it was sort of a, we both sort of created that same response in each other. And then all of a sudden she's calling me these names, swearing at me and running away. That, to me as an 18-year-old kid with not a lot of experience, not a lot of confidence, that shook me. Whereas like maybe at that age, maybe Eric is like, hey dude, like I've done this before, or at the very least, this is something that I'm really excited about. I'm confident in. The experience goes well. And then he turns around and is like, let's do that again any night of the week, So again, it's sort of the idea of, we all look at the world through different lenses, and those lenses are painted by our past experiences and our personalities. And so we put on these glasses, or we have these glasses on, and we look out. You and I look out at the same thing, and we see two very different things.
Yeah, I see her perspective entirely, because I love this chick. I hope she's listen. Let me get her number after the show. She shows up drunk, ready to get laid, and you're nervous, and she doesn't want to be your therapist. She's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I sympathize in totality with her, and I get your perspective. But yeah, I think when you've told the story before, everybody on the side is like, oh, this chick was crazy. No, this chick was drunk and horny, which I think are the finest people. Like, the finest people on the planet are drunk and horny. So I feel, is she in the Boston area? We'll talk offline. Okay. I've thought a lot about, so I know that you said you talk about anxiety more than depression on this, and I think it's probably the title of the book, but I was thinking about the anxious. I like the anxious in some ways, because if you're scared to do things, you don't do them, and then there's less competition for people like me, because I don't have anxiety. But I'm also anti-anxiety in the sense that I think it creates a lot of people that are socially awkward. And I like going out and talking to people. And I think social awkwardness and anxiety probably are hand in hand in a lot of cases, because they're worried about saying something stupid. They're worried about being judged. And I would just like to say, I'm judging you for not saying anything. So you might as well say something. You might as well be fun. Take a crack at it. I'm going to go, at least you tried, Do you think that's healthy? Do you think I should be a doctor? I think I'm getting to the meat of the problem here.
I mean, obviously it's a very nuanced subject, right? Of like, if you talk to somebody who has social anxiety, you do have to, treat them with some caution, or at the very least, like, give them the space to feel comfortable and all that. I will say what is fascinating is there are like folks like yourself, right? Who, like, nobody came to you and said, hey, here's a degree, a certificate, a badge that says you are allowed to act in this certain fashion, right? You're allowed to be outgoing, to say whatever you want. And yet, like, that's just your personality, and you do that anyway, right? So some of it is like nurture versus nature, in the sense that, like, some of us are born that way and that's just how we are. Some of us are like, you know what, screw it. I'm not born this way, but I'm going to go try it anyway. I actually have a good friend who lives in Boston, and he is, these are words that would come out of his mouth. He's like, I'm pretty socially awkward. I think I, might be on the spectrum a little bit. I do things that are kind of strange, but like, I don't really care. I go out, I talk to women because I want to do that. I push myself into things that are uncomfortable. And even though it's like awkward and strange at times, because, like, maybe he's like, if I have a little autism, like, my brain is not saying this is weird. This is weird. I know it is, but I don't have that same feeling in me. He's like, I go out and I do it anyway. And Brian, give this friend all the credit in the world, because you look at somebody like that and you say, he could very well have just decided from day one, I'm never going to open up. I'm never going to talk. I'm awkward. I'm shy, whatever. And I've known him my whole life, since probably 3rd or 4th grade. And he was like that for a long time. And in high school, he was like, I remember him saying to me, he's like, I have to go do this, even though everything in my brain and body is telling me not to, because if I don't, I'm going to be that kid who is, living in his mom's basement at 50 years old with no prospects of anything. So to sum all that up, I'm like, yes, there is a nurture, there is a nature. You can, like, sure, it becomes a lot harder for those of us who have that, sort of reclusive or introspective or introverted nature to then go out and be extroverted. But you can do it. You can push yourself and you can work yourself into those corrective experiences that then say, hey, I went out, I talked to somebody, I had a good time. It was enjoyable. We laughed. And, you're probably, that person is probably not going to end up with a personality like yourself, but you never know, right? I would be curious to know like what your own upbringing was like and, where your personality developed.
So I think, I don't know if it's nature versus nurture. I'm an Army brat. So I moved 9 times in 18 years. I went to 3 different high schools. And I think it did occur to me, like I started doing my hair like this at about 7th grade because of Uncle Jesse and bad guy wrestlers were always weird about their hair. So I was like, that's an interesting. And once I started, I got attention quickly, which I liked. And then I sort of added on from there. But if you move 9 times in 18 years and you go to 3 different high schools, if you were quiet, you're fucked. There's just no one pays attention to you. It's so fleeting. It's like, especially overseas tours, I equated them, and I've never been, but to like summer camp. There's nobody else around. Your grandparents aren't around. Like legacy friends aren't around. There's no cousins. You are there with a whole bunch of other people that are just there. And so I think you get tight quickly if you participate. So I think I noticed early on, the more that you try, the more you're going to get some sort of social capital out of that. And I think that's just continued. But who would I have been if I just stayed in one place the entire time? I don't know. Maybe I'd be normal, but we'll never know because of the United States military and colonialism. So here we are.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us can say that, right? Is we will never know what we could have been like had our lives gone in different fashions, but we are who we are. And you get to the point where you say, I'm taking stock of my life. And if I don't like who I am or where I am, I do have some agency. I can make changes. I can decide to go somewhere else, pack my life up and move. I can go to the bar, try to strike up conversation. Yes, it's not easy, especially for folks that are more introverted, but like you can do it. That is an option.
Yeah, there are no rules. That's the other thing too, is like we're spiraling towards death. We're, living finite lives on a doomed planet. Joe, fucking talk to some chicks at a bar. Let's go. We're all dying.
I really like that. Man, it's crazy. There's times, right, where I'm like, you just get stuck in your mindset or your ways of like, oh, like for me, right? I'm very health oriented and I'm like, oh no, I can't eat that. I can't do that. Like, because of the way that I orient myself or whatever. And then there's days where I'm like, I step back and I think in the same fashion that you just did. And I'm like, I'm 35. I'm not going to be alive forever. Like, hey, who the hell knows? I might get hit by a bus tomorrow. Would it really kill me to eat an ice cream? That sort of thing,
Yeah, I think, again, I'm going to work this in, but humans being binary absolutists, there is some value to being balanced in the gray medium middle. That's one way of getting balanced. The other way is on the extremes. Like, I read a fair amount of philosophy, but if the Patriots lose, I almost cry. I'm on the brink of tears because people that don't know me, that happen to wear a jersey of a city I don't even live in, failed to play sports as well as I think they could have. That's insanity. But I think people should be balanced. It makes them interesting. You don't have to be a trope, is I guess my point too. Once you get out there, just don't be the guy you saw on TV. Just be interesting. That's the other thing. But you're going to do things to be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, they say, right, like everything in moderation, including moderation. So
exactly.
For the most part, live in the middle, but you do have to decide, like, where am I going to take a stand? What am I going to be passionate about? What am I going to lose my crap over? Yeah. It shouldn't be nothing. It should be something. And maybe you want to be calculated when you decide, like when you are going to decide to be like, this is my thing. I care about it a lot and I'm standing up for it or whatever. But mostly in the middle. And then once in a while, like, yeah, you gotta put yourself out on a limb sometimes.
Oscar Wilde said something about how all excess and all renunciation both suck. It's like, yes, it's complicated. There's no guide. You're just gonna, I don't know. It's weird. Okay. So this is what I did because you have been on a shit ton of podcasts. So what I did is I watched a bunch of them. I took all your About Us. I took your Amazon review of the book. I took all my own thoughts. I put them into the AI. And then I said, give me some controversial questions to ask the fella. All right. Wow. So this isn't my, well, it kind of are because they're my notes, but this is what the robots came up with. That's going to be my layer of protection in case I say anything that really pisses people off. But then again, I don't fucking care. I don't care. Okay. This is number 1. Is anxiety actually a disorder or is it just being alive in the modern world? So this is what it says. It says, with 1 in 5 Americans diagnosed with anxiety disorder and millions more self-diagnosing on TikTok, Where do we draw the line between a medical condition and a natural human reaction to a chaotic world? Is it a bug or a feature, do you think?
Man, such a good question. I'm going to answer it. I will say, I respect the fact that you don't care and you're not going to be like, it's going to be very hard to offend me. So don't worry about that. Maybe we offend the audience. I don't know. How do I answer this? Like the thing that I get tripped up on is it a bug or is it a feature? What I think about is, you had said like, is it a product of humans living in this modern world, right? My research, my writing, my experience lends itself toward, yes, basically we're cavemen that live in this crazy modern world. And so what I mean by that, right? And I was actually like, I was watching, there's a TV show on Netflix called The Mind Explained. And there's a guy, Robert Sapolsky. He is a professor at Harvard. He's written a few books. He's super smart. He's a little depressing because he goes down to like everything is predetermined. There's no God, there's no meaning, that sort of thing. But he is very insightful. And he so succinctly put this when he was like, okay, your brain is designed, right? Our brains, and especially like the fear centers of our brains, which are friggin' ancient, right? They've been around for millions of years. They were designed to say, hey, there's a hungry predator in front of me. I need to get the heck out of here or fight with that thing. And so we've got our amygdala in the fear center of the brain in the limbic system that says, run for your life, right? Today, we still have that amygdala and it's still programmed to say, hey, I'm super scared, do something, run, fight in the middle of these threatening situations, which, I guess to give the game away is we're not being chased by hungry predators anymore, right? We're opening up our phones and seeing things that we don't like. And so our brains are constantly overstimulated and assaulted, I guess, by these fear-provoking things. And so our amygdalas are constantly screaming out like, run, do something. And yet like, it's basically that mechanism was designed for immediate, in the moment, scary life or death threats. And yet it's still running. And now it's running a lot more than it was designed to in this modern world because we face all these other kinds of threats. So it's there's basically a term that people will give to it called evolutionary mismatch, which is our brains evolved for an environment like the one I'm talking about, where you're a zebra on the savannah and there's a predator in front of you and your brain says run, right? We still have that brain, and yet the world has changed quite a bit since that time. And so one of the reasons a lot of us feel anxiety is basically the fear centers of our brains are working overtime. And so with all of those, chemicals that they then dump into our bloodstreams, we're looking around and being like, like I shouldn't be nervous about having this conversation. I shouldn't be nervous about just walking out in public. And yet I am, because my brain is just going haywire. So I would say if you want my answer, it's more of we're a caveman in a modern world and there's a mismatch there. At the same time, like, to answer the part of like, where do we call it anxiety or not anxiety? And like, is it just part of the human condition, that sort of thing? It's definitely part of the human condition in the sense that like, we all get afraid of things. We all get scared of things. Where is that line of like diagnosis? I can't look at somebody and give that determination because I'm not a therapist, but the logic is typically when the anxiety inhibits somebody from living their life in a way that they want to, that's when it gets diagnosed, versus like, hey, I get scared from time to time. Like, that is just part of life and living on Earth.
Yeah. I don't think people give humans enough credit, because for 300,000 years, we were running away from things that were trying to kill us and our children, and just trying to get a fire going so we didn't fucking freeze to death and try to get inside. Like toilet paper, I think, is something like less than 200 years old. Indoor lights, the third shift was unimaginable because when the sun went down, you went to sleep. And now we have everything humans have ever known in our pocket constantly. And you're right. Our dumb lizard brains are prepared for this. And on one of your other podcast appearances, one of the hosts was a bodybuilder. And the word rumination comes up a lot because I think we roll things around in our head a little bit too much. And he said it's hard when he says he likes lifting weights because when he's got 400 pounds on his back, he can't think. And I wonder if running away from a zebra or whatever the fuck, starting a fire, planting, hoping the potatoes come up so you don't die, maybe there was less time to just sit around and think about, did I say the wrong thing in that conversation? Because we're just fucking weirdo animals trying to stay alive.
There's no doubt about it. And it actually, like, it fascinates me to think, like, you talked about toilet paper being 200 years old, and all of the things that we know and use and love every day are so young on a,
brand new.
In terms of the world itself and history and all that. It's crazy to think that, like, if you looked around and you're like, let me go back and travel in time and however many years, even 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, and say to somebody that you meet on your time travels and say, there's actually these boxes that we go to where there's these machines with these belts, and we walk on the belts because, like, we sit all day and we don't have time to move our bodies and all that. And it's like, in my mind, it all kind of comes back to evolutionary mismatch, which is basically like, we're not designed to sit down all day. We're not designed to be in front of computers. And yet that's what we need to do to sustain ourselves. And so in order to offset that, basically, right, it's like, we got to make it so that, like, one, we have to stay active because that's a healthy thing to do, but we also need to give our minds something to do. When that guy had said, I think his name was Josh, when he was like, I got 400 pounds on me, like, I don't have time to think. Yeah, we need that. We need that escape, right? We need to find our proverbial, like, hungry lion in front of us and act as though we are zebras, run away from it, and just find a way to calm our amygdalas back down.
And you look at what some of the things we do, I've defended alcohol off the air, but like when you're drinking, you're kind of shutting your head off a little bit. I think people do drugs to escape, or certainly some of them do. Meditation is an absence of thought. I think maybe our brains just need to power down sometimes, and it's hard to do it without substances or Eastern medicine, but I think it would help. That's why I drink anyway. That's what I tell the AA group.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I guess just to round that out, right, is like, we were talking pre-show about, like, why do people do certain drugs? Why do they do things that are destructive? It's like, it's, again, that gray area. It's not so black and white, right? There is something that serves us in that capacity. Sure, hangovers stink. Drinking can be bad for your health, but, like, if you're not having a great day, if you're feeling lousy, if you want a little excitement, you have a couple beers with the guys and all of a sudden you're back. So yeah, I totally get it.
Plus, growing up, I was a bartender. I never really drank at work. I didn't really drink post-work when I got my first few office jobs. The idea of someone coming home and having a couple glasses of wine to unwind, I just didn't understand. That's my fucking life now, because I own a business. I got a wife. I got 2 kids. I'm like, I didn't have anything to unwind from. What I needed was, like, some, you know what I mean? So it fucking, like, once you're there, those things help. I know we don't want to say they do, but they really do. And I think we kind of need them. Okay, this second question is, this is controversial. I like this one. It's probably going to make people mad. Have we pathologized the human experience? So this is AI. I mean, again, I've had AI, but this is AI. It says, sadness becomes depression, awkwardness becomes autism, distractions become ADHD. Are we overdiagnosing normal emotions to the point that everyone is something? And I would say, just in my own experience, if you've ever been on social media, there's a lot of third-party personalities, meaning that for a while, CrossFit, that was a personality. I'm a CrossFit. And then those fucking, the races where you're in the mud and shit, that became people's personalities. Dog momism is a personality. Coffee drinking, for some reason. People are like, oh, I get it. You like coffee. You can stop posting every day how much fucking you need coffee. Don't talk to me till I have my coffee. So I'm just wondering if this plays into this idea too, that humans are a little cooked. I think we sort of like victimization in some cases. And if all we ever do is talk about our diagnoses, it sort of becomes a thing where, like, is this performative?
Yeah, I'm going to put myself on a limb here and say, I actually don't think this is that controversial. Sure, we could piss some people off. What I would say is, like, if you go from, like, if you look at the statistics and you say, okay, this many people dealt with anxiety, and then there is a spike, a bump, that sort of thing, either something radically changed such that people are really experiencing that more anxiety, depression, whatever, or the culture has changed such that more people report feeling that way. And so there is definitely a conversation online around, like, are we pathologizing things too much? Are we taking those terms that are part of, normal, like, regular functioning life, as in, like, I'm doing okay, but I'm sad, and saying that is depression? I do think that is happening more and more. I was just reading a newsletter that I read most days, and they did a special one about mental health. And they said that in general, people are self-diagnosing a lot more as a result of like TikTok and Instagram. And one of the challenges is like, I think they said part of the research, what they did was they created new accounts, and they said that by hour 5 or 6 of being, on TikTok using this new account, if you were purporting to be I think it was like 13, 14, or maybe slightly younger than that, pretending to be a kid, right? By hour 5 or 6, 1 out of every 2 videos that you saw on the platform was mental health related. So it's like, if you're always getting these messages of like, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, that sort of thing, like that just becomes the water in which you swim, right? And you see everything as anxiety, everything as depression. I'm not trying to belittle things that people are going through, because like, again, it comes back to that line of like, if this is getting in the way of you living your life in a healthy manner, yes, go to a doctor and see if they give you a diagnosis. If you are just, however, on TikTok watching videos that make you feel bad about yourself and your condition, I would think twice before saying, I have this condition, I have that condition. It then becomes, and I use this term loosely, right? It becomes something of a mental handicap where you're like holding yourself back, being like, I can't do that because of my anxiety. I can't do that because of my depression. When in reality, like, if you actually work with a therapist, if you actually get a lot of the different skills that you need in your tool belt in order to work through anxiety and depression, you see that like these things, sure, like anxiety stinks. Like I've lived with it my whole life. I would way rather not have ever lived with it. But it becomes something that is just like part of your life that you just have to work through. Not necessarily something that is like, I can't do any of these things because of my anxiety. I can't do any of these things because of my depression, right? They're just things that you work through. You work through with a professional, and then you put in the time on your own, right? You find whatever things help you the most, whether it's meditation, walking, running, CBT related things, kind of like reframing your thoughts and all that. Like, I want to make sure that people are not just necessarily putting themselves in these holes, pigeonholing themselves and being like, I'm anxious and that's the end of it. I fear that is happening a lot more these days, especially with social media.
I think you're right too. I want to put a comma in that, but I think the placebo effect is intense in this. I mean, just in life in general. I think it was Benjamin Franklin, might have been somebody else. Some one of these geniuses took a test when they were a kid, came home, they failed it. They didn't know. They gave it to the parent. It was like, "Hey, your kid's a fucking moron." And the mother said to the kid, "You're a genius. This test says you're one of the smartest students the school's ever had." And whoever that was went on to invent a million things and be very successful because they didn't tell him he was fucking dumb. They convinced him he was a genius. And even with therapy, and I've never been to therapy, I'm not going to Tom Cruise this thing and jump on a couch or anything, but like constantly bringing your issues to the forefront. There is no end game with therapy. I think they need you to keep coming because then you keep paying. And I would venture to say a large part of why 13 and 14-year-olds are seeing you probably are depressed, you probably have anxiety on social media is because of the next question, which is this: why is America the capital of meditating emotions? The United States makes up 4% of the world's population, yet we consume 50% of the global psychiatric drugs. That's a lot. So again, the machines, they said it's incentivized over prescription. Pharmaceutical reps literally are given prizes like free lunches, samples, and in some case speaking gigs for pushing their drugs. Insurance covers pills, not people. So insurance companies gladly cover medications, but limit or deny access to therapy. That's a problem. One psychiatrist, for example, could see dozens of patients per hour if they just write scripts. There's direct to consumer advertising. The United States and New Zealand are the only 2 countries where big pharma is allowed to advertise on TV. So I could be watching a football game and then go to my doctor and say, hey, at halftime between Patriots and Colts, I saw this shit I think I should have. I don't have a fucking degree. And then I think profit motive shapes diagnoses. So like ADHD and depression awareness campaigns are often brought to you by the companies that sell Adderall and Zoloft. So my point is we're one of the few, maybe the only country that has a for-profit healthcare system. And then lo and behold, who takes the most pills? And again, you don't want to say you don't have this thing that, everyone has said you have, but there is some sort of, there's an oddness about this, don't you think?
It's definitely odd. How I look at it is if somebody has experienced something very difficult, like they need whatever, like they need some help, right? And if that help is going and getting a drug, getting on an SSRI, like if they're experiencing panic attacks and they need to get on a benzo temporarily, something like that, like I'm all for that. I think one of the challenges is that we have started to medicate very quickly without actually addressing the underlying problems, right? So if you look around at our society today, it's a pretty sick society. It's like we run on capitalism. A lot of these companies do shady dealings that are very strange and kind of put people, like, here's an example that I always give, and this is just capitalism, nothing more to be said about this, but it's like, a company reports earnings and they're like, we cut half our staff and the stock goes up by 10x. It's like, that is a crazy thing where basically like humans are not really valued that much. And I get it, like it's capitalism, that's how it goes. But you think about how that then plays out, right? Is like, okay, a lot of people have jobs where they don't feel valued. A lot of people are in communities that like have grown to the point of disrepair, or like where people do not come together and have that shared sense of community anymore. And so you ask most people like, okay, are you engaged at work? The majority of people, no. Do you have close relationships and friendships? The majority of people, no. Have you been through adverse childhood experiences, or have you experienced trauma in your life? A good amount of people, yes. And so what I would say is like, drugs can absolutely help you with those things. However, like that can't be the end solution, right? If you have a job that you don't like, if you are part of a community that is just not there for you, if you don't have friends, if you don't have that support system, like it's not all that different than being like, I'm just going to have a few beers every night, right? Because what you're basically doing is you're saying, I'm taking these emotions, which are very hard to deal with, and I am dulling them down. And I'm not trying to say that drugs and alcohol are like SSRIs and alcohol are the same exact thing. I'm saying the mechanism is similar, where you're not addressing the things that need to be addressed under the surface. Where I would go even deeper, I would say is that sometimes, taking an SSRI, being on a benzo, whatever, some of those things can get you to the point that you need to get to in order to then take action, right? And that is an amazing thing. However, if we are just getting to the point of like, hey, keep your crappy life, keep your crappy relationships, don't improve your life, but take these drugs, like that's literally a Brave New World. We all read that book in high school. I don't think anybody wants to be there.
No, I go back to Dave Chappelle's Inside the Actors Studio interview a lot. I think it's one of the greatest interviews of all time, but he said something, I think it was in 2007. It was right after he came back from Africa. I don't know if you are old enough to remember this whole thing, but he walked away from a shit ton of money at Comedy Central to go find himself somewhere else. And he said in the interview, he was talking about Mariah Carey and somebody else, whoever, had public meltdowns. And his point was like, these are strong people. You don't become one of the greatest singers in the world and one of the most highest earning entertainers without being super strong. So is it us, or is it the environment that's toxic? And I think a toxic environment, I think oftentimes if you see children that present problems in school, they're coming from a toxic environment. If you're seeing an entire country that has the problems we have, perhaps it's because we don't have a single payer healthcare solution. We don't have social safety nets. Higher education is largely unaffordable. So climbing the ladder is difficult. Like there's not a lot here for us. We are cogs in a capitalist machine and we're treated as such. And then lo and behold, we have some fucking issues. So I don't know. I think it's probably truth, unfortunately, somewhere in the gray middle, but it's concerning.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. I guess what I would say is like, it really needs to be addressed. Like, sure, it would be great if we had some, systems or whatever that supported us more, but we don't. And I don't know what the best ones would be. Like, I'm not a public policy person. So what I will say is all this stuff, like, comes down to an individual level, right? You have to be honest with yourself and say, do I like where I'm at in my life? Do I like who I am? Do I like who I'm spending my time with? Sadly, like, and it sounds a little corny, but it's like, sadly, I think a lot of us would look at our lives and be like, yeah, I'm spinning on a rock in space. This is the craziest friggin' thing in the world. And yet, like, I'm just told to like work a crappy job till I'm 65 and like retire and like take 20 years and enjoy myself. Like, no, that's silly. Right. So I think in that regard, I want to say like a lot of our discontentment and possibly even some of our psychoses, like, come from that, of like living out of alignment with the people and the circumstances that we want to be or we want to be in.
Yeah, it's a real pain in the ass. This next one, okay, so this is mostly a me question, but I think with anxiety, it's bizarre. It's sort of like this Eckhart Tolle thing, like sort of who's watching the Watchmen. So anxiety, ostensibly, is coming from our brain. Then I have to use my brain to tell my brain to stop being so fucking anxious. Like it's almost, I had a brain doctor on. It was like, it's odd that we study our own brains by looking at dead people's brains. Like, shouldn't I just be programmed with the answers? Wouldn't that be if there is a creator, shouldn't it come with a manual or built-in manual or something a search bar would be nice. So I am telling it to stop being so anxious, even though it is the thing that's making me anxious. I think, right? If all of this is coming from the goo in our skull, that's a little strange. How do we, have you thought about this? Does this make sense?
It does make sense. How I would break it down is, yes, you're right. It's weird where your own head is creating the anxiety and somehow like your own head is also supposed to be the solution. Like, yeah, kind of doesn't make sense, or at least it's very frustrating.
Yes.
I think if we break that down a little bit, we say like within the brain, there's a lot of different structures, right? And so we talked about the amygdala, which is essentially the fear center of the brain. You look at humans versus other animals. We have, in the very front of our skulls, we have these things called prefrontal cortices. Those are the parts of our brains that allow us to plan and regulate ourselves and think critically, think about the future and all that. And so what essentially happens, right, is like when we get anxious, our amygdala hijacks our prefrontal cortex. And so the fear overrides our ability to think critically and regulate ourselves. And that's why it becomes so challenging and so frustrating is you're like, oh, I'm supposed to be thinking in this fashion, but I can't do anything else, right? Your amygdala has hijacked you. So how I phrase it is like, you basically got to get away, find a way to break that cycle. Maybe moving your body, maybe running, treat yourself as if you are on the savannah thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Find a way to wedge your foot in the door, the proverbial door, right? Get it so that amygdala is not hijacking you so much. And then once your prefrontal cortex comes back online by virtue of kind of, breaking that chain a little bit, then it makes a little more sense to you to be able to be like, okay, I know my psychiatrist or my doctor told me to do these things, maybe meditate, maybe recite a mantra to myself, whatever. It's really hard to, when you're totally freaking out in stage 1 of anxiety, it's really hard to be like, I'm just going to go do my mantra. Like that's impossible, but once you have wedged your foot in the door a little bit and been like, okay, amygdala, like calm down a little bit. I'm giving you reason to calm down. Then, that critical thinking part of your brain comes back online. You're like, okay, a mantra makes a little bit more sense right now. Yeah. It is challenging. It's very frustrating. I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. I'm like, I wish most of us didn't have to deal with anxiety. At the same time, right? It's like we talk about that gray area is if we never experienced any anxiety, we would probably go run in traffic, or at the very least, like we do things similar to that. So how I phrase it is like, and a lot of people say it this way, we do actually want some anxiety in our lives to say, hey, those things are actually threatening. So avoid those or run away from those. Anxiety, but when we're dealing with it is like, we're experiencing way too much of that. So what we're trying to do is just scale it back a little bit more and be like, okay, it is a survival instinct. Let's treat it as though it really is that way. Or at least if I can experience it that way, I won't feel so bad about it, right? When I'm just having an anxiety attack sitting in my room, that's not helpful whatsoever. So it's a tricky world. It's a tricky brain. The best we can do is make sense of it a little bit and then try to work with it given the way that it's built.
My stupid brain's trying to understand my stupid brain. I'm just going to stab the amygdala with an ice pick a little, see if I can regulate it. That makes sense, I think. It's weird to me too. So we talked a little bit about drugs, not that we're advocating them in the pre-show. I used to float in sensory deprivation chambers. I don't know if you've ever done this. But it forces your brain into what they call theta wave meditation, which is what the monks do. It's not what you do before hot yoga. It's like some real deep shit. And I'm a big fan of psychedelics, specifically mushrooms, but I've never done the heroic dose. And what they say the heroic dose does is give you ego death. And I always kind of let that phrase, like I didn't really pay attention to it. I thought it meant ego as in like how great I am, but it means the separation of soul and body to some degree. And that's what I was doing unbeknownst to me in sensory deprivation tanks. So when you're off into the ether floating through space, I just wonder, like, there is no anxiety. Like everyone's like, oh, I get claustrophobic. I try to understand. You have to understand claustrophobia is such a human bound fear. Once you're floating off in space, there is no fucking claustrophobia. I wonder if I leave my amygdala behind. Maybe our soul is free of all this shit that we need here on Earth. Wouldn't that be nice? If it's just pure existence.
That would be amazing. Yeah. I mean, I don't pretend to know that much about spirituality or anything like that. But that would be great. And I will say, like, my friends and I have all done ayahuasca before, and I did not reach ego death myself. But one of my friends, he was, you when you do ayahuasca, you talk to some spirit. It could be part of your brain or whatever. I have no idea. But you're in there being like, I'm talking to some deity, something larger than myself. And so he was talking to his version of the deity. And it was like, we're going to ego death. And he's like, no, 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 I can't do this. And so he resisted very hard and made it so that like he didn't go there, but the thing wanted to take him there. And yeah, I mean, I've heard of people who have experienced ego death on, plant medicines like that. That scares me a lot, but it's also one of those things where it's like, okay, I think to myself, am I wrapped up in my own human bound fears where maybe you have one of those experiences and it kind of breaks you free to be like, there's not all that much to be scared of. I was separated from my body and I did just fine. Like I don't have to worry about like, crossing the street next week or going to a job interview or whatever. Those are all very worldly things that in the long run are not as important as maybe I'm making them out to be.
And so a thing I would used to push this sensory deprivation tanks pretty hard on people. And they would always ask, like, because you leave feeling unfucking believable. It's not just the moments where you're out there in space, but afterwards you feel great. And people would always go, well, yeah, but how long does it last? I go, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours, but I'm telling you, now you know what life can feel like. It is just pure bliss. And I don't think there's any room. Maybe the good parts of your brain, even after, are burying whatever bullshit the amygdala's tried to come up with, because it's a high like MDMA, but like without any chemical-y shit. It's just pure bliss. So I guess the point is, this is attainable if it wasn't for all this other fucking bullshit and static.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. One of the other things that I just want to touch upon in this space, right, is like, we talked about the amygdala. We talked about, which I probably didn't name it, but like the stress response in the body, right, is basically there's a stressor in front of us. The amygdala goes crazy, that sort of thing. What is so challenging these days is we live in a very stressful world and a chronically stressful world, right? So it becomes this thing where like, we don't even necessarily realize, or like maybe we did a long time ago, but now we're 5 years into a job that is very stressful and has been very stressful. And we've adapted to it on some level, like as in we're not losing sleep. We're not staying up through the night every single night because of a stressful job. We're like, we find a way to cope with it. And yet our brains are still like, this is a stressful thing day in and day out that I am experiencing. So what can happen there, right, is like, again, the amygdala can just be firing all the time. And you basically get to this point where you are just dysregulated. It's like the body was not designed to be in that stressful state for that long. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, there's where your anxiety comes from. Generalized anxiety, malaise, all these different conditions of like, your brain is just put in this situation that it's not necessarily meant to be in all the time. And that's where it can be really difficult. Cause like, it's one thing if you're like, oh, I get this really important like speech that I'm giving and I'm really nervous about that. Like, sure, that stinks. Nobody wants to go through that anxiety either. But when you're in that spot of like, I'm just anxious for seemingly no reason at all, that is really difficult because you're like, I feel totally broken. I don't know what's going on here. A lot of the time, that is sort of like basically like the end stage of like a burnout or something, right? Where basically your brain has just had it. And it's like, we need to make some changes here. In general, like large sweeping changes. And until we do that, like we're going to feel pretty weird.
And I don't think we are. So I'll ask you this last question because we're coming up on the hour and I don't want to keep you forever, but this was one, and I think you just touched on it. Do you think modern life is simply too artificial for human brains? So on top of everything you just said, we also have processed food. We have fake social media connections in replacement for friends. Artificial light is a 24/7 news cycle. It could be that we're just putting diesel in the wrong kind of engine. The brain's going, what the fuck are you doing? And that makes, I think it could just be the core. Everything is different than it used to be. And the way it used to be was that way for so long. There weren't generation gaps for 300,000 years. If you were a farmer, your father was a farmer, the grandfather was a farmer, maybe you got a new kind of hoe at some point. Maybe somebody used the metal thing instead of a wood thing. But life is moving so fast. I can't relate to my children. I didn't get the internet into my house until I was 16. The iPad is raising my 2 kids, so there's just such a fundamental difference between every human and every 10 years for the past 200 years. And are we going to, you said something about us No, not changing it. Oh, we're not changing it. There's no way, unless World War III wipes out, there was no more fucking internet or air conditioning. But so I don't think we can change it. And I don't know that our brains are going to be able to adapt with this much change, considering they're not adapting machines. They were built to we have dumb lizard brains, I think.
Yeah, and I mean they are built to adapt, but over really long periods. And
Right.
technology is moving so fast that that evolution is not happening fast enough, at least. How I would answer the question is like, this is as dark as I'll get. Right? No, we're not designed for modern life. We're not. At the same time, I don't see that as like a we're doomed kind of thing. I see it as an impetus to be like, now it is more important than ever to take your breaks, to go for walks, to meditate, to get that stress relief, to go back to farmers markets, get healthy, real food, to get off of the processed packaged food, all of those things. I'm not saying that you can't enjoy any of the fruits of modern life, but like being inundated by them every single day, like, I mean, it's sad, right? But where you see a world where we're cascading toward like the Disney movie WALL-E, right? Where like everybody's floating around in some like, like hover chair, insanely overweight, like touch it, doing their entire life on a touchpad or whatever. That is, it's funny because it's a Disney movie, but it's pretty dark, like that's a possibility. I hope we don't get there. I certainly hope we don't. But like, yeah, it's more important than ever to get back to nature, to do the things that are more aligned with our bodies, right? It's like I try some days more successfully than others. I try to get up. I try to go for a walk, get some sun. There's like science that basically shows that when you get that early morning light, you're regulating your circadian rhythms, which allows you to, go to sleep on time and make it so that your brain is, synthesizing and secreting the right hormones at the right times, and you feel good, and you're not experiencing as many mood swings and anxiety and all that. So yes, it's a scary world out there, especially with the cell phone and the social media and all that, and it's a stressful world for sure. At the same time, right, it's like this is your call to be like, hey, those friends that I have, I need to spend more time with them. That family I have that's really supportive, you need to spend more time with them. When I have that meal and it's wholesome and it's healthy and all that, do that a little bit more. Use those other things, right? An ice cream, a pizza, whatever. I'm not saying you need to get rid of those things. I'm just saying use those as more like treats, to be like, I ate healthy all week. Now I get to treat myself. I get to go have some of that packaged food. When you're living in the world of like, hey, I'm eating that crap all the time, it's not hard to see a future where it's like, yeah, we live to 200, but like we just spend all our days connected to a bunch of medical devices. So yeah, get back to nature when you can, balance things out, to round the conversation out, try to live, in the middle, in the Goldilocks zone a little bit more. Yeah, all that stuff's real important.
They came back full circle with balance. It's all about balance. I don't know, when you said something about the sun, I read this meme the other day. Somebody was like, man, I really don't understand vitamins. Somehow it's in the sun, but also in a banana. And I was like, yeah, that's strange. Oh, fuck. Anyway, listen, I know you've done a million of these and I appreciate you doing one more. Do you want to tell the people where they can get your books, where they can read your blogs, where they can get more Brian?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. And I want to say thank you. You did your homework. That was great. Really cool to see that you've listened to some of the previous episodes. If folks want to find me, feel free to go to my website. That's getoutofyourhead.com. No dashes or spaces or anything like that. On Instagram, you can find me as well. The handle is Get Out of Your Head. Again, no dashes, no spaces. Books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, all that sort of thing. Appreciate you having me. Great conversation. And it's cool. I mean, we definitely need a little bit more laughter and excitement and all that. So
I think we do too. So on that point, do me a favor, stick around in the green room. I'm going to log off the official broadcast. But listen, America, you got to tune in tomorrow. We're going to be talking about U.S.-Russia relations. Another hilarious subject. Oh, it's going to be great. Yeah, man, go take a walk. Drink some bourbon. You'll be happier. Good night.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.